Let's start with Enron's surprising rise to dominance. First off, it all began in 1985, when two relatively small companies, Internorth and Houston Natural Gas, merged. This created a powerhouse with something no other competitors had: a vast and complementary pipeline network across the United States. That merger positioned Enron as a giant in the natural gas industry, but it wasn't without growing pains. Still, under Kenneth Lay's leadership, Enron began to solidify itself as a market leader.
Right. Kenneth Lay was the visionary, if you will, though a controversial one in hindsight. His ability to consolidate operations and think long-term was critical. By the late 1980s, Enron wasn't just marketing and transporting natural gas. It had pivoted into new business areas like electricity, water, and even broadband. Lay capitalized on deregulation in the energy sector, and this gave Enron opportunities to innovate, or at least appear innovative.
You mentioned innovation. This was key to their brand. For 6 years, Fortune magazine heralded Enron as America's most innovative company. But a big part of its innovation wasn't just flashy projects like power plants or broadband networks. It was in its accounting techniques. Enter Jeffrey Skilling and Andrew Fastow, the architects of what we now know as a financial facade.
Exactly. Skilling brought in mark-to-market accounting, a system that allowed Enron to record potential future profits as if they were happening in the present. On paper, this made it seem like Enron was raking in billions, even for deals that were shaky or wouldn't pay off for years.
And here's where Andrew Fastow comes in, right?
Just so. Fastow created special purpose entities, or SPs for short. These were essentially shell companies that Enron used to hide its debt. By shifting liabilities off the main books, they made the company look far more successful and stable than it really was. It was clever, but also highly questionable, if not outright deceptive.
Highly questionable is putting it lightly. These tactics fooled investors and regulators for years. Wall Street overwhelmingly trusted the company, with analysts advising people to invest heavily. And why wouldn't they? Enron's reported revenue in 2000 was a staggering $101 billion, but under the surface, the story wasn't quite as rosy.
No, not at all. Those inflated numbers and the dependence on the SPs created a precarious situation, one that couldn't last forever. But from the outside, Enron looked like the poster child of corporate success. They were growing fast, pursuing international ventures, and even entering sectors like water and broadband. All the while, Lay and his team worked hard to project an image of brilliance.
Which makes their downfall all the more shocking. A company that grew from a modest merger to a $100 billion empire in just 15 years, only to come crashing down as one of the biggest frauds in corporate history. And it all started with those seemingly small, clever accounting tricks.
From their seemingly unstoppable dominance to their carefully constructed financial facade, Enron's story was always precariously balanced. Those accounting tricks and hidden liabilities, which once catapulted them to glory, became their undoing. By December 2, 2001, the facade cracked entirely and the company filed for bankruptcy, the largest in US history at the time. This wasn't just a simple misstep, it was a systemic, deliberate unravelling that shocked the world.
Absolutely. A pivotal piece of this collapse was the use of special purpose entities, or SPEs, which were the brainchild of Andrew Fastow, Enron's CFO. These were essentially off-balance sheet entities that allowed Enron to hide more than $11 billion in debt. Through these, they painted the picture of a wildly profitable company while burying liabilities that would have scared off any reasonable investor.
I mean, it sounds so simple when you lay it out. Just tuck your debt away, make the books look pretty. But this was fraud on a massive scale. Not only did investors trust those numbers, but analysts hyped them relentlessly, encouraging more and more people to pour money into Enron. The whole system, it seems, was designed to mislead.
And at the top of it all, Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling. Lay, Enron's long-serving CEO, was charismatic and grandiose. He sold the vision, Skilling, meanwhile, was the mastermind behind their accounting practices, like the infamous mark-to-market accounting. This method let Enron book potential future profits immediately, even if the deals themselves were shaky, or sometimes non-existent.
Mark-to-market, the accounting equivalent of counting your chickens before they've hatched. Together, Lay, Skilling and Fastow engineered a culture of deception, and it worked for a while. Wall Street was practically worshipping them. The media labelled them visionaries. But behind the curtain, it was all crumbling.
And crumble it did. When the truth started coming out, the ramifications were enormous. Investors lost billions, employees saw their pensions vanish, and regulators found themselves facing a scandal that would shake corporate America to its foundations. Of course, it wasn't just Enron that suffered.
No, not at all. You're talking about Arthur Andersen, their auditing firm, right? Once one of the big five accounting giants, Andersen played a key role in the scandal. Not just signing off on Enron's questionable practices, but actively destroying documents once investigations began. It was a catastrophic failure of oversight.
Exactly. Andersen's involvement ultimately led to its collapse, a stark warning about the dangers of cozy relationships between corporations and their auditors. And, I think, it highlighted just how badly the system needed reform. The rules in place, well, they weren't enough to prevent or even detect this level of fraud.
I think that's the lasting legacy of the Enron scandal, how it forced an entire industry to confront its own vulnerabilities. It wasn't just Enron or Arthur Andersen that was flawed, it was the broader framework of corporate governance. What happened there changed the conversation around accountability and transparency forever.
And the fallout didn't stop there. The repercussions extended into legislation, rewriting the financial rules in the aftermath. But more on that in a moment.
And speaking of the need for reform, the Enron scandal didn't just shock the financial world, it spurred action. The fallout led to one of the most significant shifts in corporate accountability. Enter the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, or SOX as it's often called. This was a game-changer designed to overhaul financial reporting and corporate governance. It's quite literally changed how companies operate even today.
That's right. SOX introduced requirements like holding CEOs personally responsible for the accuracy of financial statements. Talk about raising the stakes. It also called for stricter auditing standards, increased transparency, and harsher penalties for fraud. Essentially, it was a wake-up call for corporate America, drawing a direct line from Enron's collapse to a much-needed tightening of the rules.
And you have to wonder how many other companies out there might have been operating on similarly shaky ground, right? Enron's downfall exposed not only its own deceit, but the broader vulnerabilities in the system. SOX wasn't just about fixing Enron-level fraud, it was about stopping things before they ever got to that point.
Exactly. But, the legacy of Enron goes beyond legislation. There's also the cultural aspect, the story of how it's become a dark, cautionary tale in business ethics. Think about it. Enron has become shorthand for greed and corporate malpractice. And yet, here we are in 2024, seeing its name resurface as part of some satirical relaunch involving cryptocurrency memes.
Oh yes, the crypto parody. Who would have thought that a company synonymous with fraud would be rebooted as a joke? But it speaks to something deeper, doesn't it? People still care about the Enron story, not because they admire it, obviously, but because it stands as a reminder of what happens when ethics take a backseat to ambition.
Right. And perhaps that's the most enduring lesson here. The importance of honesty and transparency in business. Enron's collapse wasn't just a failure of one company. It was a failure to uphold basic principles of accountability. And as we look forward, it serves as a warning against repeating those same mistakes.
Absolutely. It's fascinating when you think about how history keeps teaching us these lessons, whether it's Enron, the 2008 financial crisis, or even recent events with other corporations. If there's one takeaway, it's that innovation and ambition are commendable, but they have to be grounded in integrity to truly stand the test of time.
Couldn't agree more. And for listeners who've stayed with us through this journey, we hope the story of Enron has sparked some curiosity, maybe even a new understanding about the role ethics plays in shaping our world. It's a sobering tale, but also a powerful reminder of what we should expect from the institutions and leaders we trust.
And on that note, we'll wrap up today's episode. Thanks for joining us as we explored Enron's rise, fall, and lasting legacy. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and take care.